Can you hear me, Julie?
I can. Can't see you, but I can hear you.
How about now?
There we go.
All right,
I
good.
can see you.
Good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hello, everybody. We'll give it another couple of seconds to a minute or two here to hopefully have a few more people join us, and then we'll get started. I do know that Jonathan won't be here today, nor will Laura Valdez. Well, we'll get started. I do see that we have a quorum of the executive team anyway, so it'll allow us to continue with our meeting. With that being said, Julie, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly. Thank you. Member Evans,
Present.
Member Jakowski,
Here.
Member Davis,
Here.
Member Lewis, absent, Member Miller,
Here.
Member Olson.
Julie,
Yes.
looks like Tracy's at a different workstation. The name's showing up as Andrea Pellicino.
Oh, I see.
But
I'll
Tracy
promote
just
her.
notified me it is in fact her.
All right, I'll change her name for her too on there, so we know it's her.
There you
Oh,
There she is. She is here.
okay. Thank you. I'll rename your name here too, Tracy. Okay, continuing on then, thank you. Member Raven is determined to be absent today. Member Sullivan,
Here.
Member Valdez is also absent, as the chief noted, and Member Vega.
Here.
Thank you. Member Villegas.
Here.
And Member Fruchnick.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Bring us to agenda item number 3, consider approval of the agenda. Fairly short agenda, just a couple of agenda items. Hopefully everybody's look at those, and if there's no changes that anyone would like to make, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Sullivan on motion.
We have a first by Sullivan. Do we have a second?
Miller will second.
And Chief Miller second. Can we get a vote to approve the agenda, please?
Member Evans,
Aye.
Member Jakowski,
Aye.
Member Davis,
Aye.
Member Lewis. So I'll check attendees here. It looks like he's still absent. Okay, Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Olson.
Aye.
And Member Raven's absent. Member Sullivan.
Yes.
Member Valdez is absent. Member Vega.
Yes.
Member Villegas.
Yes.
Member Fruchnick.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Perfect. Next up is public comment. Opportunity for members of the public to address the CCP on subjects related to CCP business and not otherwise on the agenda. Speakers will have 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment?
I see no hands raised, Chair.
All right, thank you. Brings us to the consent. I do need to pull the number 6 agenda item off, as the minutes were not attached to the packet. We will make sure those are attached next meeting, and we will approve them at that meeting. So this agenda item would just approve the authorization for remote meetings. So if that's okay with the group, can I get a motion to approve, please?
Sullivan on motion.
Sullivan, is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Rocio. And can we get a roll call vote to approve remote meetings, please?
Member Evans.
Aye.
Member Jakowski.
Aye.
Member Davis.
Aye.
Member Lewis is still absent here. Okay, Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Raven's absent. Member Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Valdez is absent. Member Vega.
Yes.
Member Villegas.
Yes.
And Member Fruchnick.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Brings us to number 7. Consider modifying CCP bylaws to reassign selection of the representative from a community-based organization to the Board of Supervisors. And for this one, I'll turn it over to Phil.
All right, thank you, Chief. So I'll just have a few brief comments and then we'll open it up for public comment and deliberation. When we adopted the bylaws, there was a process that took the place happened over the course of a few months, about a year and a half ago. The bylaws were largely based on a model from Monterey County. And Monterey County specified that the authority to appoint certain positions on the CCP, including the position that's before you today, as well as the individual that represents the interests of victims, was a matter that would be handled by the CCP itself. We didn't debate that extensively or frankly at all that I recall at the time, or consider the wisdom of that approach versus other alternatives, including the alternative that's in front of you today. In discussing this with the chief and others more recently, though, as we now have the vacancy to consider for the seat that's assigned to, looking for the language, a CBO with experience in providing rehabilitative services to persons who have been convicted of criminal offenses, we discussed whether it might make more sense to be more efficient to align the selection process with the selection process that the county uses for seats on local advisory boards, commissions, and committees. For those boards, commissions, and committees, the clerk of the board publishes a list annually of entities that are out there that people can apply for membership on. And they can apply whenever they like over the course of a year, and they can reapply year after year. And then they'll be eligible for consideration when a vacancy occurs. And then I think more importantly, for a position that becomes vacant unexpectedly, such as when somebody resigns, they'll publish notice for at least 10 days prior to any filling of the position to encourage people to apply. And I think 10 days is the statutory minimum, probably not what would be sufficient here. And then ultimately, as applications are received, they're provided either to the full board of supervisors or to an individual supervisor, depending on the nature of the commission. And a recommendation is made and approved by the full board in a public meeting of the board of supervisors. So we talked about applying that process here, what that would look like, and that's what's reflected in the staff report. We basically take this responsibility off of, by and large, the plate of the probation chief and turn it to the clerk of the board, as well as Supervisor Villegas, who is our board representative, to handle, with the chief available to assist as needed. We recommend it for your consideration because we think there's a lot of efficiency in this approach. It aligns with an existing practice, and it would avoid the probation chief having to work with his staff to notify the public of vacancies, attract and review applications, and then bring those back after some sort of internal review process to the CCP to consider. So in bringing this forward, I just want to conclude by saying we're not trying to in any way limit the debate to just this or the alternative that exists in the bylaws. If the CCP wanted to arrive at maybe a middle ground that takes some of the work off of the probation chief's desk, he could appoint a subcommittee or rather request that he appoint a subcommittee to handle this issue. But we're open to any suggestions the CCP has that would appropriately fill this position in a way that I think is, or that we think is efficient for all, considering all issues. With that, I'll pause for any questions, and if there are none, then deliberations and public comment.
I'll turn it over to the CCP body for any comments or concerns. Chief Miller, looks like you're.
So it seems kind of vague that it's a community-based organization versus, kind of a refined list. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't develop some sort of list of what CBOs would be appropriate for involvement in the CCP.
The language that I read a few minutes ago, that was directly out of state law. I think it would be appropriate for the CCP to develop a list of organizations that it might want to target in recruitment efforts for the position. But if there was an alternative or somebody else came forward that wasn't on that list, if they fit within the statutory category of a CBO with experience in successfully providing rehabilitative services, we'd have to consider that application as well. I do think your recommendation, though, is a good one for the CCP to consider in terms of the recruiting part of the effort.
And historically, Chair, I'm not sure how it's been done. In my nearly 6 years, I don't think that we've gone through that process of having to designate or nominate somebody.
It's before me too, since we've had to do this. I don't know if Tracy, probably the most tenured member, if she remembers anything as far as how it was previously done or not.
My memory is vague on this. We might have been before we even had bylaws. But I believe that the CCP had a discussion about it, and then we decided to go with a representative from the Day Reporting Center because that was back in the day when the Day Reporting Center was a pretty robust partner with us. So there wasn't a ton of discussion. I don't recall accepting applications. I think the CCP just made a selection after discussion internally. I heard Phil say that there's another option, which would be have an ad hoc committee of the CCP that could do what Chief Miller says, come up with recommendations for criteria, and could also accept applications and then make a recommendation to the CCP. Is that one of the ideas?
Yeah, that's essentially what I was suggesting. And as part of that, if you wanted to, you could also work with the clerk of the board to advertise generally. I personally don't know if there's much value in that as opposed to direct outreach to organizations that might be interested, considering the nature of the position.
Yeah, I don't know when's the time to express opinions, but I like the idea of having an ad hoc committee made up of CCP members where we could utilize the strengths of what's already established with the board, but the selection process stays with the CCP.
Kind of the same mindset. Are we creating a solution to a non-existent problem? Other than the efficiencies that you've described for advertising, but it doesn't seem like it is an issue or problem to fill that position, by the CCP previously, currently and previously.
I don't know if that's a question to me or a statement. As I said,
How it came
I
about?
developed.
Or how did this become an issue or come about?
Yeah, well, it's in talking with the probation chief about the process to go through. Frankly, I want our probation chief to be running probation and not trying to figure out how to fill seats on the CCP. So we discussed, okay, what's the most efficient means of doing this? That led to discussion of the alternative that's in front of you today, which aligns it with an existing process that's worked effectively for years for, I think, about 36 different advisory boards and commissions. Again, though, we recognize in our conversation, I didn't really emphasize this in my initial comments, there is likely a desire on the part of CCP members to have some control over the process. So we knew that was a tension that the CCP would grapple with in considering this as well.
Yeah, I think I would definitely think an ad hoc committee. That way it takes it off of the probation chief, as you mentioned, and it still keeps it within the CCP and.
Okay. Others? Oh, sorry, John, I didn't
Oh,
mean
no.
to
I
cut
think
you
that
off.
would just be a viable option.
This may be a question that I should know the answer to already, but I'm going to ask it anyways. The current member was SCOE or is SCOE, right? So they're not the CBO anymore, which is why we're going through this process. Am I understanding that part correctly?
Correct. Mark Nigel resigned his position from the CCP.
Okay. That answered the second part of my question. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of the ad hoc with the CCP and going that direction, at least now. Maybe in the future when we've kind of figured out that and defined it a little more and done this once, going in a different direction may make sense. I know, I staff the CSAB board, which is we go through the other process, and we've really struggled to find ongoing membership with just the normal press releases and newspaper postings and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe it's that experience that's given me a little hesitancy around kind of moving that direction. But I think because of that experience and because of the fact that this is the first time that really anybody but Tracy, it sounds like, has kind of gone through this, and Tracy even is struggling to recall how it happened last time. Getting a little more process from the CCP members, defining that and moving forward, I think makes sense to me at this point.
I tend to agree. I think, we're sort of building kind of a new team or a new group of folks here and kind of gelling and figuring out where we're heading. And I think it's actually a really nice strategic opportunity for an ad hoc group to kind of be strategic about maybe the selection of a certain partner or CBO and kind of be involved in that process. And but I do also share the sentiments from Ian a minute ago about the advertising piece and kind of actually finding folks. I mean, it can be very difficult. But I don't have a tremendous opinion either way. Chief, I know there probably was a reason we're pursuing this, but it does feel like, right now, I think we're almost kind of relaunching to some degree or kind of on the cusp of doing some new items with this group and strategic planning and other bits and pieces. I think it would probably be best, at least this time around, for us to go through it with an ad hoc, but I don't feel super strongly either way. So if there's some reason that I'm missing that, we're torpedoing, I'm open to that, but I think the ad hoc sounds like a good meet in the middle place.
Okay. Any other comments before I turn over to public comment? Not seeing any. Julie, do we have any public comment?
I have one hand raised, Chair, Brandon Clark.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Clark.
Hi. I realize I run the risk of sounding really dumb in this conversation because there's a lot of acronyms and things that I'm not really sure of the import of. What position is it that's needing to be filled? And what's the relevance of it in the whole CCP? Like, does that make sense? Or I can't get, I hate this format. So
it does make sense, but it's public comment. We won't have a back and forth a dialogue, but
I'm just trying to get a better understanding of the question so I can format it correctly. Like,
So Chief, I can respond to this briefly. So there are 14 seats on the Community Corrections Partnership. And the one that's vacant is a seat for a representative from a community-based organization with experience in successfully providing rehabilitative services to persons who have been convicted of a criminal offense. And that's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's directly out of the statute in terms of what the legislature contemplated for this particular seat.
fair enough. Has there been any outreach to like any universities or sociology programs where there might be people that are actively trying to understand and learn more about these kind of systems, since it's such a new actual endeavor? Like, I know that there's a lot of campuses. Stanford comes to mind, UCLA, and it's not Cornell, but there's another one that's doing a lot of research towards basically how to reduce recidivism and things that everyone's facing. Is like, how do we make this transition to stop having all these drug felonies and like get people back to their lives, you know? Maybe it's just out of nowhere, but like, it seems like you guys have an opportunity to do something, I don't know, I guess unique here. Like it's just seems to me that there should be, I don't know what I'm trying to say with this, or how I'm trying to suggest this. I know that there's people available for stuff like this. Like down in Stanislaus, I know that there's an abundance of people that are in these fields. I don't know that they're administrative level, but I don't know where you guys are looking, but have you guys considered that? Like reaching out to schools, I guess. I'm not sure that's it. How do I get this back? How do I stop the rest of my time?
I think he's wrapped up, Chief. Oh, Chief, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. Nolan, we'll get to you in 1 second. Julie, is there any other public comment on this agenda item?
I see no additional hands raised, Chair.
All right, I'll turn it over to you, Nolan.
Thanks, Chief. So, I mean, Phil, Mr. Clark brought up an interesting point. I mean, what is considered CBO? Could we do a UC Davis research, or could we? I mean, what is that? And I'm sure it's actually spelled out in the legal language. But what is the definition of that CBO seat? Who can fill that? Just in general, do you know off the top of your head?
There's no definition of that in the CCP statute, so we have some discretion to.
Okay, so it's something the ad hoc could kind of go through and be strategic about.
I'm sorry, I was talking over you.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's something the ad hoc could kind of suss out and kind of be strategic about, is really kind of, what does that seat mean? What do we need? And could that be an educational, placement? Could that be, something maybe non-traditional? I don't know. So it sounds like maybe the ad hoc has some liberty there to kind of suss that out.
Yeah, I mean, actually, read the statutory language. CBO, that's kind of a generic term. I mean, there are different meanings we could find for that and definitions that already exist, even in some county materials. But the second part of it, successfully providing rehabilitative services to persons who have been convicted of a criminal offense, that's pretty narrow. So, I mean, there's definitely multiple organizations out there. I don't know whether that can carry us into the realm of a university or other public education or private educational institution. But yeah, those are issues that an ad hoc could chew on a little bit.
Well, Phil needs some help here as well. We've heard from 4 members that their preference is to go with an ad hoc. Seems like more of a consensus of that route. Do we need a motion to approve that and form the ad hoc? Can it be by consensus? What are your?
No, I think a motion would be good, and the motion would be to authorize the chair of the CCP to appoint an ad hoc committee. Actually, no, I take it back. we'd bring it back to the CCP, I think, at the next meeting for appointment. The chair would bring back a recommendation at the next CCP meeting to form an ad hoc, and he'll specify the proposed members to recruit for and make a recommendation to the CCP on the appointment of the position for CBO with successful experience in providing rehabilitative services.
Okay, perfect.
Makes sense?
Yep, so we'll bring it back at the next meeting with it all laid out and move forward from there. All right, well, thanks you for
So you want to
that.
make a motion? I was
Oh,
suggesting.
so we actually need a motion to do that, is what you're saying. I got you.
I believe that would be appropriate.
I would make the motion to bring this back. Whatever you said, bring this back at the next meeting so that Dannon, as the chief probation officer, can appoint an ad hoc.
You'll bring back a recommendation on an ad hoc, yeah.
And I would second that.
All right, so we have a first and a second. Can we get a vote, please?
Yes, thank you. Member Evans?
Aye.
Member Jakowski?
Aye.
Member Davis?
Aye.
And I see Member Lewis is here, but I'm asking him to acknowledge that he could be a panelist. So I'll try to promote you, Mr. Lewis, if you want to accept that, and then you can become, there we go. So, okay, Mr. Lewis, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Member Miller?
Aye.
Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Raven's absent. Member Sullivan?
Yes.
Member Valdez is absent. Member Vega?
Yes.
Member Villegas?
Yes.
And Member Fruitnick.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Brings us to number 8, refine outcomes, strategies, and metrics for the 23-25 CCP strategic plan. Over the last couple of CCP meetings, we've met and we've had different versions of the potential strategic plan. This is just a further process. Hopefully we're getting them kind of narrowed down and starting to further refine them and get them to a place where they need to be. What I'm hoping, Julie, is you can bring the draft up and we will basically go through it, maybe not line by line, but minimally section by section. And just for feedback and comments. I know there's some of the time frames that are somewhat subjective. And so we can discuss those. We can discuss the actual strategies, the outcomes. And then I know Ian had reached out to me and he has a further option to refine them even a little bit more. I would like to start with this if possible. And again, just kind of go by section by section. We have been going back and forth, like I said, through various meetings, and this is kind of what we've landed on, but obviously open for discussion and changes or additions. So the first section, and we're struggling a little bit with just even naming it because we've went from calling it goal 1, 2, and 3 to A, B, and C. If someone else has a better idea of how we can label those so we can still refer to them, but without putting them in some sort of hierarchy structure, saying these are our primary goals, and then it comes B and then C. So still got to kind of think about that. We'll start with the strategies under that first section. Develop metrics and common method to measure success for CCP funded programs. Implement adopted performance measures model by June 30th, 24. And develop integrated justice and behavioral health data sharing platform. I'll open it up for discussion or comments on any of those strategies. I know the last one, over the course of the last couple of years, we've had various meetings and groups working on that strategy. I know Kevin O'Connell has come up with a few potentially viable platforms. It's twofold, it's multifaceted, some issues. One is just the actual doing it, developing the platform and how it's going to pool, etc. There's a funding issue potentially, and then also just a policy, who's going to partake, and the politics, for lack of a better term, behind it. So those are some issues with that specific strategy. But does anybody have any comments, concerns, or anything with those group of strategies?
I just had a question about the implement the adopted performance measure model by June of 2024. How did we select that date?
I was thinking the ad hoc still is meeting and trying to come up, and that's going to take a couple more months to define that. But like I said, some of the dates are arbitrary, to say the least, Tracy. So we can definitely move that up or change it if you think so, or the group thinks so.
I mean, I personally would rather have a shorter time frame, and if we have to extend it, we have to extend it. But that's almost 2 years from now, and I figure we've been saying that we need to have performance outcomes. And I guess maybe I'm not totally sure what's the difference between the first one and the second one.
I think my thought with the first one is develop the metrics through the ad hoc work, and knowing that that's still going to take some time, and then coming back and then starting to actually, I guess, implement them and be held accountable for them, and to really start doing them, basically.
Yeah, I would prefer to advance that, and if we have to extend it, we have to extend it. But I can defer to those people that are on the ad hoc committee for that. I think there's an ad hoc committee for metrics.
Right. Okay, then we're obviously taking notes, and we'll maybe make some adjustments to those. Other thoughts on that one from the group? If we push it out, if we backtracked off 6 months from it and made it happen 6 months sooner, does that a little bit more palatable? Getting a thumbs up. Okay. We'll move over real quick to the outcomes for that section. Basically, we would be tracking the number of CCP funded programs and performance measures, and then the number of departments participating in the data sharing for the Integrated Justice Behavioral Health Data Platform. Leave that open to the group for a quick discussion, if there's any questions or concerns. And please don't be shy to chime in. Again, I know the group's put a lot of work in these, but we want to make sure they're right as much as possible. I'll move over to the next strategies. Research programs that prevent further criminal justice involvement, evaluate effectiveness of existing diversion programs, and identify strategies for enhancements. Implement enhanced identified prevention programs, increase enhanced diversion efforts, and implement Crisis Now Stabilization Receiving Center with the various dates for implementation on those as well. We'll open it up to the group for questions or comments. Scanning boxes.
Sure. I just want to make sure, I just went through something similar at my city about, these metrics and outcomes, just make sure that the individual groups or responsible parties did review it. They're good with it. They think that they are viable and collectible.
Yeah, for this one, primarily the CCP analyst and then HHSA. I don't know if Nolan, Ian, or Carlene has any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, it's already in our wheelhouse. I mean, the last item there, I mean, the bulk of this item probably falls with the analyst, but yes, we're well aware of the Crisis Now piece, and that makes a ton of sense.
Sounds good. And then the number of individuals served through the upstream prevention programs and the number of individuals served through diversion programs would be the two primary metrics for this. Next, we'll move to that third section, better organize and enhance information on the website, CCP website, reconvene media subcommittee and develop a plan to promote the work of the CCP, increase traditional media and social media posts, produce an annual report, produce an online dashboard. And with that, it would be number of press releases, number of social media posts, number of visitors to the CCP website, and number of visitors to the CCP dashboard. In essence, this section is trying just to promote the good work that the CCP is doing and make sure the community understands that there are these services and programs out there.
Hey, Dan, this is just my familiarity with the process. So is the media subcommittee and the outcomes and metrics, are those both subcommittees or ad hocs as part of the CCP? And do we have those identified yet?
No, we do not. Again, I have to defer to Tracy. I think she would have the best memory for the media subcommittee, but I know at one time there was, and my understanding was it helped define what type of press releases were going out and what type of media was going out.
Right. The media subcommittee already has a membership and I wouldn't say a strategic plan, but it has a description of what its purpose is. And I can go find that and send it to Dan for distribution later. But that's the only thing I know about is the media subcommittee. And we didn't do social media. We expressly at that time decided not to do social media. So if we're going to do that, we need to probably put that on this media committee's agenda for discussion.
Oh, perfect. Julie, can you scroll down to the next sections, please? So the next is inventory and custody treatment programming. Develop process to annually evaluate in custody substance use treatment and medication assisted treatment. Implement evaluation recommendations for both SUD programs. Implement brief jail mental health screening and utilize that screening tool to inform future programming for services in custody. Now this one we could add a little more to because the outcome is increased in custody programming to address the needs of this population, but the metric is number of individuals served by in custody programming. I suppose by getting those numbers, we can tell year over year if the numbers are increasing or not, but it does seem like we're potentially missing some sort of metric there. Primarily the sheriff and HHSA for this section. I'll turn it over to the group for discussion. Tracy, I see your hand up.
So these are for Matt, I guess, Matt Davis. When we tore down Lineberger and our DRC went out of the jail and a lot of our program went out of the jail, and then of course COVID hit. So we had the double whammy of reconstruction and COVID. Almost everything stopped, if not everything, in the jail. And my understanding was once it was safe to do so by the public health officer, and once the Lineberger got back online, that we were going to be able to implement a lot of programming back into the jail. So I'm wondering why these timeframes are, like the SUD is not until December 31st of 2024, which is more than 2 years. And some of the other things, I'm wondering why the timelines are so long on those.
I would agree that they're far out under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, this year, we've spent nearly 10 months now trying to recruit and fill the position of our treatment coordinator in the jail. So far unsuccessfully, unfortunately. We've had 3 individuals start the process and then back out. Each time that happens, that pushes it back. We are interviewing a pretty good number next week. And best case scenario, that person will be in place by the end of the year. So normally I would agree. I think at this time, it's hard to pinpoint a date right now without that position up and running. And also Lineberger's still not up either. That's still months away at best. It may be longer due to staffing. Those are my issues when I look at the dates.
Do you think it's possible? I mean, obviously we have to wait till Lineberger's up and running, but do you think it's possible to coordinate with HHSA or at least get input from HHSA or my office or whoever you think that you would take input from? And even if you don't have a jail coordinator, you didn't have a jail coordinator before. I think it's a kind of a new position that you got funding for. I just like to brainstorm ideas to get this going sooner rather than later, especially if we're going to start doing some reentry services. It's super important from my clients to start their rehabilitation when they're incarcerated, so they can transition more successfully into the community.
We're willing to have that discussion, certainly. The reason I pinpoint right back to the treatment coordinators, part of the whole idea of rebuilding Lineberger was really to increase programming. And like you said, COVID has just unraveled so much of what was initially good intention and still is. It's just we're behind the ball now, and still catching up from that. But we do look forward to dramatically increasing the amount of programming than we've ever had before.
Okay. Then the only
Well,
last, oh,
Sorry. Go ahead, Tracy.
the only last thing before it goes to Ian, could we add something in here on our strategy about ensuring culturally competent services for all the clients? And I'm specifically thinking, there's issues with language barriers. There's issues with mostly language barriers, but there's other issues. But could we add that as a strategy of making sure that all programming, whether it's in or out, but all programming is culturally competent, including alternative work programs, whatever's delivered inside the jail, et cetera. I'm looking at Matt, I guess.
So, who specifically were you asking, Tracy, or just generally?
Well, I'd like to add it, so I don't know, but I mean, if someone has an objection, then of course we'd have to discuss it. But if no one has an objection, then I'd like to just add as a strategy that we include culturally competent services.
I'll start. I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't know if anyone else has any other comments.
Hey, Chief, can I just ask a question? Tracy, do you mean for services that the CCP funds, I assume?
I'm talking about everything. CCP.
I don't think the CCP can get into everything. It would have to confine itself. I should have started with this. I think you have to confine yourself to what the CCP has actually got its fingers in terms of the strategic plan and funding.
Well, the CCP funds the sheriff's department to the tune of several $1 million. So, I mean, if you want me to trace exactly where all those dollars go, I think we could do that. But I think that it's a pretty low hanging fruit just to say that we would like in-custody treatment programming to be culturally competent. We would like substance abuse treatment to be and medication assisted treatment to be culturally competent. We can just start with the things that are on the strategy. I was actually more broad. I would like it to be embedded in everything that we do. But if you're saying that we need to keep it to these strategies, let's just start there then.
Well, actually, what you just said is where I was going. You said just a moment ago, everything that we do, meaning the CCP. If the CCP wants to have that rule for itself, I don't see an issue with that. I'd understood your comment maybe to be saying that the sheriff's office in everything it does needs to have the cultural competency requirement. And I may have misunderstood, which is why I asked the question in the first place.
Well, yes, I would like everything the sheriff's office does to be culturally competent. Yes, 100%. But the strategies here are easy. We can, if everyone agrees, we can add it to these strategies. But these strategies don't cover everything that CCP funds at the sheriff's department. So I guess to be clear, yes, I would like it to be everything the sheriff does. If you're telling me I can't make that request, then I would like it to be everything that the CCP funds, which are these strategies plus whatever else they get funding for from the CCP. Which includes, I think, electronic monitoring, some of the work, the alternative work project things.
So I'll chime in briefly. I think to your first question, Tracy, the reason that item 3 on here had a December 31st, 2024 date initially was because it was building off of 1 and 2, right? Implementing those programs, getting them up and running, and then looking at evaluation methods for those and evaluating them annually. So having them up and running for a period of time. The increased medication assisted treatment just went live, like WellPath just hired the staff about a month and a half ago. So they're working on ramping up. The in-custody SUD program hasn't started yet. And so the thought was developing, like getting those programs launched, ideally sooner rather than later, like you said, and then having at least a year of time to evaluate those, and then seeing what recommendations there might be for improvement to those programs, and then implementing those recommendations. So that's what item 3 was, is looking at the evaluation of at least a year worth of those programming, making recommendations on improvements, and then implementing those recommendations. But I think your last point brings up an interesting point, which is something that isn't included in any of these, I think, is this speaks to things that are specifically funded by the CCP right now. And we're talking about in custody stuff right now, but generally for the whole plan, it focuses on things that are currently funded or currently happening, but there's not like an open-ended kind of strategy or even outcomes in certain, I mean, I guess the outcomes are somewhat open-ended. There's not open-ended strategies to do some of these similar things, envisioning something programming that the CCP may fund in 2024 or 2025 or something like that. So that may be something we want to consider before we finalize this strategic plan, is how to build in some of that flexibility to do some of these same things with future programming or support that the CCP may fund. And I don't know what that language looks like, or, you know, if folks have suggestions around that, but I think it's an interesting piece to consider. And Dan, to your first point around the metric for here, that was the thought, I guess, when I put this together, was that, you know, if we collect this, once we determine, which is another piece we have to have a conversation as a group about, or maybe, you know, this gets kicked to the outcome, you know, subcommittee. But how often do we want to collect these metrics? But the idea would be, if we collect them, let's say we collect them every 6 months, or we collect these high level, you know, metrics annually. This one, the first time we collect, that's our baseline of the number of individuals being served. And then we're collecting those over time. And so we can see if there's an increase, right? If we served 500 folks last time we collected it, and we served, you know, 700 folks this time we collected it, and we've seen an increase in those being served in custody programming. That was my thought behind that metric.
Thank you. Anyone else? We will have to figure out the cultural competency part. Oh, sorry, maybe someone, sorry, thought I was stepping on somebody. What I was thinking, Tracy, when you were first talking about it, I was thinking more funding for training in this area and implementation across the CCP. So maybe before the next meeting, we'll have to work on some language and right, maybe it's a different section or something. I'm just not sure where the conversation is led, where a clear path forward in this regard. Unless I'm missing something, I don't know if anyone.
I mean, what I'm referring to, I'll just be very clear, is services delivered in the language my clients speak, or a language line used to translate into a language that they speak, something like that. And that's not everything. I mean, no, cultural competence is a lot more complicated than that, but I would like to start there.
Okay. And we will try to come back with some sort of wording for that for the next meeting on the strategic plan. The next section is identify opportunities to add restorative justice interventions to existing programs, and implement addition of restorative justice interventions in existing programs with coinciding timeframes there. With the metrics, number of individuals served by programs utilizing restorative justice and number of restorative justice conferences held annually. I'll open it up to the group for this section as well, for comments or questions. Scanning boxes. Not seeing any.
I have some.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. This just makes me go back to the last one. I guess I didn't understand some of the strategies. If our goal is to increase in custody programming, but the strategies are to take an inventory, to evaluate, and then implement evaluation recommendations. So is it the third one that's going to be increasing custody programming, or how are those strategies designed to increase custody programming? I guess is my question.
again, he might have to help me. You spoke on it briefly, but I think it's to get a baseline of the number of individuals served, and then year over year look to see if it's increasing or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to the figuring out some sort of language in the strategies around open-ended, you know, open-ended ways to meet some of that. I was envisioning, Tracy, that implementing some of the evaluation recommendations for both SED programs would help increase that. But I think there's other things like, you know, getting the treatment coordinator hired and onboarded, and, you know, having them do that inventory, you know, or work with partners on that inventory of in-custody programming to see what makes sense and what may be able to be brought in. But this is where I think, you know, we need feedback from the group, in my opinion, right? I threw a bunch of ideas on a piece of paper and brought it forward. So I think, you know, we need suggestions from the group on what else to add here, what language to change, what other strategies might make sense, what metrics may make sense. So, you know, I think we need that language to add in here to a new version and for the group to consider. I think it's also, you know, it takes more work, but it also ties into, you know, building out of a tactical plan for each of these, which is something, you know, that we do with the board strategic plan. So I'm the lead on the, you know, 2 of the board strategic plan items. Behind that overarching, you know, outcome and strategies, we have a tactical plan that details out more things. And so under each of these strategies, there'd be like probably 2 or 3 tactics, you know, and that's where I think we could also build in some of these if the CCP wanted to get that detailed. That may be going, you know, from our previous plan way, you know, way too far forward. And it would take a lot of work to get there. But I think that was also one of the, you know, potential paths forward is building that out. And I did a mock one for the next goal, if that would be helpful for folks to, you know, walk through and see what it might look like. But yeah, I mean, I think we need, you know, we need to be looking for language to answer those questions you're bringing up, Tracy. I think they're exactly what we should be talking about in these sessions.
Yes, because to me, it looks like we're doing a lot of assessment and evaluation of gaps. But, you know, in the one below, it says implement addition of restorative justice interventions. So would that solve the problem? Just put a sentence like that is after we assess and evaluate, and then we have to actually implement the items that we think that we need. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, almost tying into that first bullet there, like after inventorying of the in-custody programming, we know that we have funded the in-custody SUD and the in-custody MAT. So in addition to implementing the evaluation recommendations for those, then yeah, some generic line like implement, you know, additional programming based on the in-custody treatment programming inventory and I mean, maybe we say recommendations from the CCP or something like that.
Like inventory and, you know, inventory what exists, find out what the gaps are, fill the gaps, and then assess. I think the fill the gaps part's missing.
Apologize, I was taking notes. Nope, yeah, it seems like something's missing there, and then to increase it and to move it forward. For sure, we'll come up with some additional wording, which we can look at for the next meeting. I don't believe, I think I read them, but we didn't discuss the next box with restorative justice and the metrics. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with that? All right, Julie, can we move to the next section, please? So under this strategy, evaluate collaborative courts, identify gaps, needs, unaddressed by programming, evaluate mental health diversion program to identify gaps, needs, unaddressed by existing programs, implement evaluation recommendations for collaborative courts, expansion of and mental health diversion needs, evaluate jail-based competency treatment program and other competency needs to determine if adjustments to programming levels are needed, and implement evaluation recommendations for competency programming. The outcomes would be number of individuals served by post-booking diversion programs and percent of individuals served by post-booking diversion programs who are directly linked with post-custody programming. I know that's a lot, but does anybody have any concerns or questions there? Sorry, just scrolling through, checking the boxes. I don't see anybody lighting up or their hands raised. Which brings us to the next section. Map out desired reentry discharge planning processes and identify responsible parties, identify gaps, needs, and current reentry discharge planning supports, identify insurance, employment, and housing status of Yolo County PRCS and 1170 individuals, fund staff necessary to address the gaps, and implement desired reentry discharge planning process. Fund and implement programming to meet the top 4 crimogenic needs of the PRCS 1170 population. This gets us back to kind of the core of realignment and those realigned population and ensuring that we're meeting their needs specifically, in addition to all the other great work that the CCP does, but to make sure that we're applying resources and staffing and funding and everything to that specific population. With that, we look at the percent of individuals receiving in custody mental health or substance use treatment that are connected to care within 30 days of release, and percent of individuals who are insured, employed, and homeless upon release, and number of PRCS 1170 population served by programs that target their top 4 crimogenic needs. Turn it over to the group for consideration or comments. All right, with that, I think that's it, Julie. I'll turn it over to public comment on this agenda item. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do. Looks like we have Brandon Clark.
Go ahead, Mr. Clark.
All right. Hi. So this is much more in the realm of something I feel capable of talking about. The jail, oh, screw that part. The part about AB 109 initially, its population, like you just said, its core population is PRCS release inmates or whatever. Where is like thoughts about going to programs at all? Like all these are all nice metrics and data and all this, but you don't have anything to collect them. There's only one program, Walter's House. Why don't we have another program? Why don't we have another outpatient? Why don't we have more resources to get these people off the streets, to get people off drugs? Like everything's focused, your treatment options are more emphasized in jail than on the outside. What good does it do to give somebody treatment in jail when they have no access to the drugs that are out there? You know what I mean? If you're not teaching people how to live while they're out released, what are you teaching them? What are you giving them? You guys are getting a bunch of money making ad hoc committees, doing all this, and it sounds nice, but the words are just words. You got people going back into jail, back into jail, back into jail for nothing, essentially. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that are continuing the negative spiral that goes with drugs, but there's not being any other options seen on the other end. You know, it's the same story. It's 11 years now, and you guys don't know that you guys are supposed to be functioning for one population alone. What is the restorative justice? That should have been taken care of with restitution. Restorative justice is done. We need to get back to our lives. How do you help us? Because that's what all this money's for. Why isn't the jail fixed? Why is there no program? I mean, I get COVID, but these are questions that are really valid. Like, where's the import on this? 3 years down the road, Ms. Olson was really good in pointing that out, because it's like, where's the help now? Y'all got like salaries and pensions and all this. What are we getting except for more nothing? You know, that's really what all I got to emphasize on that is there's a lot of people wanting help and just not having it available to them and not getting it, not knowing where to turn. If you don't have mental health issues, okay, then you're screwed there. It's just this weird system that, like, the CCP is supposed to exist to help people that aren't getting help, yet there's no help even on the perspective horizon, because it's committees, I guess. I'm sorry, this just, is there somebody I could talk to outside to get a little bit better understanding of how this is working? If I can contribute in some possible way to, I don't know, like, I just want to help because I need help. And I feel like it's not happening, and I would like to do something to encourage that. That's it.
Thank you. Next up is, oh, sorry, we need to figure out where we're still at with this. And Supervisor Vegas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I know you don't want to go back and forth with public testimony, but I actually would like to piggyback a little bit on the comments that was just made under public comment. You know, maybe one of the things that we ought to do is to at least lean into verifying whether or not we're keeping track with where the trends ought to be going, and that is adding a strategy or some sort of a component of the plan that looks at what other counties are doing. The Board of State and Community Corrections keeps inventory of the Community Corrections Partnership planning documents. It's a pretty good way to go through and see whether or not there are, you know, innovative, creative approaches to doing business that is incredibly complicated, complex, and I don't presume to have the answers here, but it might behoove us to at least consider, you know, taking a look at that as a way to, as I said, compare and contrast what we're doing with like-sized counties that might be like-minded, but are exploring our creative alternatives. Because I'm looking on their website, and they're starting to, I mean, they haven't been historically, but they've got pretty much everybody's plan on there. So it might be worth taking a look at.
No, good point for sure. We will double down on that and review it and see if there's any opportunities for us to improve our current plan. Other comments or suggestions? Not seeing any. What we'll do now is we'll try to capture this conversation and update the strategic plan prior to our next meeting to just continue to further refine it with hopefully the goal of potentially at our next meeting to vote on it and approve it. If not, we still have one in November, a meeting in November that we can do. Ultimately, we'll have to get it before, we'll have to get the close out of the current one and this new one before the board by the end of the year. So we'll continue to move forward and hopefully keep refining it and make it a great strategic plan that we all want. I'll close out this agenda item and we'll move on to the last one, which is member announcements. Does any member have any announcements that they would like for the group?
I think we, we announced a month or so ago that the DA's office and Health and Human Services both got Prop 47 grants. And so we've been working on the RFPs for the HHSA one that will hopefully get released sometime in October. For the grant requirements, they have to, services have to start by March 1st of next year. So we're trying to get those out the door quickly and up and running. We're envisioning it working a lot like the previous Prop 47 program, where there'll be some civil legal services, there'll be lots of housing supports and wraparound case management and support to really navigate folks struggling with substance use issues primarily, but also co-occurring issues, navigating them into treatment, into housing, and providing ongoing support for those. So we're really excited for that, to have it up and running. You know, we had a gap in between our last Prop 47 project and saw the impact that it had, not having that programming in the community. So excited to get this back and going.
Well, thank you for that update for sure. Others?
Should you introduce John? Or did you do it last time? And
I did at the last one, yes.
Okay.
John Rose, our new CAO/CCP analyst. And he is very excited to just dive right into all this good stuff. Thanks, John. Any other member announcements? All right, with that, we'll adjourn. Our next scheduled meeting is October 24th. And it'll be primarily for further strategic planning process. I appreciate everybody's time and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Chief.